Hello, this is the fourth and last part of our lectures on modulation. In this video, we are going to talk about enharmonic modulation. Let's remember this example. That was the example I showed in my first lecture on modulation. Let's listen to it. So the key is E flat minor. The initial key is E flat minor until that point. And here happens a modulation. The 3 chord in E flat minor is at the same time the 5 chord, the dominant chord in C flat minor. So, and here happens the modulation, and after that we hear the tonic, the C flat minor chord. So, we talk about this in our first lecture on modulation. But actually, in the score, we don't see C flat minor chord at the end of the progression. We see B flat minor chord instead. Everything is the same. It begins in E flat minor, and the 3 in E flat minor is the dominant chord in C flat minor, and after that the key signature changes and we hear B minor chord. B minor and C flat minor is the same sonority, only the notation is different. That was only the reduction. This is the actual score, and you see the motions and G flat and then G flat major chord, and after that B minor. Let's have a listen. We called this modulation common chord modulation because of this common element, but now we see there's also an enharmonic spelling. So, should we call this modulation enharmonic modulation or not? This question will bring us to the differentiation between enharmonic spelling and enharmonic reinterpretation. We are going to see some examples about that, beginning with this Mendelssohn excerpt. It is taken from the string quartet by Mendelssohn, and the piece or the excerpt is in A flat major. Everything is notated accordingly with some borrowed chords. For example, here you see a flat 6 and minor tonic chord in second inversion. But the interesting part is here. First violin and cello is written in A flat major or in A flat minor, but the middle voices are written in another key. We are going to talk about it. Let's have a listen to the excerpt. Let's take the lower system and make it bigger. So, if you take the bass line as the roots of the chords and look at the sonority, we will see that the first chord here in this passage, F flat major, and the second chord is C flat dominant 7th, and the next chord once again F flat major, and after that F flat major 7th, which is E flat, and D diminished 7th in first inversion, etc. But why are these instruments written differently? In F flat major, we have F flat, A flat, and C flat. Imagine how it would have looked if it had been written in the original spelling. So instead of B natural, we would have C flat, and instead of E natural, we would have F flat. It wouldn't cause much problem, but beginning here, you will see instead of A natural, which is very easy to read, very easy to play, we would see it as B double sharp and E flat. And also here in the viola part, instead of D natural, we would see it as E double flat. Mendelssohn spelled these lines, these two parts, violin 2 and viola parts, enharmonically in order to make them easier to read for the players. And note that it doesn't change anything in the resulting sound. We will hear the sound, the result will be exactly the same. We call this practice enharmonic spelling. Let's take a look at these examples. We have the same situation 3 times, A, B, C, and it is in F major. In F major, 7, 7 of 5 goes to a cadential 6-4. And then I will skip B part for now. Once again, 7 of 5 goes directly to 5. If you look at this pitch, this is theoretically correct spelling of the chord. This is B diminished 7th, and we spell it as B, D, F, and A flat. But after that, we hear A natural because it is a member of the tonic chord, and we have a cadential 6-4. Although the notation is correct in this case, A flat is the member, theoretical correct member of the chord. In the praxis, it looks a little weird, having a natural, a half step higher natural note after a flat. Because if we use flat, then we expect a lowering. After A flat, we expect G. Or it can go also up, B flat, C, etc., but not A natural. So, but here you see the same sound, also B diminished 7th, but this time instead of A flat, it is spelled as G sharp. The reason is practical, because after that A follows. Although this is theoretically wrong, because as you know, A flat and G sharp are different notes in the theory, in the praxis we can accept this respelling if there is a practical reason for this, and there is a practical reason to make it easier to do for the player. But here you see A flat, and A flat goes to G natural. In this case, it would be weird to write it as G sharp. After G sharp, we expect an upwards movement, not downwards onto G natural. So, as a result, you see the analysis is the same, although it is spelled differently in both cases. The analysis is the same because it doesn't change the resulting sonority. Let's take a look at this example. This is taken from the String Trio by Schubert. It begins in B flat major with F dominant 7th chord. This is 5, 5, 7 of B flat major, but after that we don't have the tonic chord, B flat major, Also, we don't have the diatonic 6. We have G flat major, which is a borrowed chord. It is borrowed from the parallel minor. It is flat 6. And what we have after that is its dominant. This is a tonicization of this flat 6. It is 5 of flat 6. The chord is D flat 7. And once again flat 6. And here we have 2 6 of flat 6. As you see, we spent a lot of time in this flat 6. So it would be actually better if we take this as a modulation, G flat 1. Instead of flat 6, that was a common chord modulation then. Like a deceptive progression with a borrowed 6, taking it, by the way, this is 5-7. Then we don't need this labeling anymore. We can write 1 and here 2, 6. And after that, 1 in second inversion. The interesting part is the following. What is the next chord? After that, we have C sharp 7, C sharp dominant 7. If you listen to it, after 2, we hear G flat major in second inversion, then C sharp dominant 7th, and we are going to hear F sharp minor. Actually, what we hear is a D flat dominant 7th. It is the same chord, the same sound. And D flat dominant 7th is the dominant chord of G flat major. So I can label it as 5-7, which would make the second inversion tonic chord, the cadential 6-4, and then minor 1. Instead of writing it in G flat minor, because if you think about the relative major, it would have been then B double flat major, and theoretically it is possible, but there's no key signature for B double flat major and also not for G flat minor. So because of this practical reason, Schubert changed the key signature and continued the music in F sharp minor. Shall we call this change as enharmonic modulation? Absolutely not, because it doesn't change the sound. This is the important part. We should ask ourselves if it does change the sound. In this case, if you close your eyes and listen to the music, and let's say we have perfect ears and we can hear everything in the music, no one could notice this change from G flat into F sharp. It is not orally perceptible. So then it is not an enharmonic modulation. It is just an enharmonic spelling. And you see here the analysis. It begins in B flat, then 5-7, after that flat 6, and this is the point of modulation. It changed into G flat major. 1, 5-7, 1, 2, and here happens the enharmonic spelling. I'm saying it once again. This is not enharmonic modulation. This is enharmonic spelling. On the other hand, we have enharmonic reinterpretation, which is the important part for us. If we talk about enharmonic modulation, Enharmonic modulation is about enharmonic reinterpretation. Let's take this sound. In D flat major, 5-7, it is an A flat 7 chord. If we spell it differently, instead of G flat, if we take F sharp, the sound wouldn't change. We still have the same sound, but the chord, the labeling of the chord will change. Now it is not 5-7 chord in D flat major, it is a German augmented 6 chord in C minor. As we know, like all the other augmented 6 chord, also the German augmented 6 chord is spelled on flat 6. And we can find, if we take A flat, we can go a minor second down, we will find the key it belongs to, C major or C minor. This time it will be orally perceptible. After A flat dominant 7th, I should go to the tonic. But after the same chord, if I go to a completely unexpected chord, we can perceive it orally. I modulated, and we call this enharmonic modulation. I will explain it very soon. Now let's take a look at the second line. We have a diminished 7th chord in A minor. If I spell it as G sharp, B, D and F, then I'm in A minor. This is 7, the 7-7 in A minor. But instead of F, if I spell it as E sharp, then that means this is an E sharp diminished 7th. The first one was G sharp diminished 7th, and the second one, although the sonority is exactly the same, but the function, the key it belongs to changes. And here it is E sharp diminished 7th. That means I'm in F sharp minor. And if I spell it once again differently and write it as a D diminished 7th, instead of G sharp and B, I wrote A flat and C flat, then I'm in E flat minor, although the sonority remains the same. And finally, I can also spell it as B diminished 7th, then that means I'm in C minor. We are going to see some examples about this. What you should notice now, we have two chords. First, a German augmented 6 chord and a dominant 7th chord. We can reinterpret a German augmented 6 chord as dominant 7th chord. We can also reinterpret a dominant 7th chord as German augmented 6 chord. And another chord which we can reinterpret in many ways is a diminished 7th chord. As I said, we are going to see some examples about it. Let's begin with the augmented 6 chords. As you know, we have three kinds of augmented 6 chord, and all of them are constructed on the flat 6. The first thing we should do is to spell an interval of augmented 6th, and then if we add, there are many different definitions. Some books, for example in Koska, it says if we add tonic note, we are in C major or C minor and we add C. Or you can notice that this is a major third here. This is the Italian augmented sixth chord. If we add also the second degree, or you can also notice that was major third and now a perfect fourth. Then it is a French augmented sixth chord. By the way, the first one. This is the Italian augmented sixth chord. And the second one. This is the French augmented sixth chord. And finally, if we add instead of perfect fourth or the second scale degree, the flat 3. Or you can notice that was major third and now perfect fifth instead of perfect 4. We will get a German augmented sixth chord, and the sound is. You shouldn't have any problems in this, especially in the German, in the identifying and spelling German augmented sixth chord in order to understand enharmonic modulations. Let's say we have a harmonic progression in G major. It begins with the tonic and we have an usual neighboring here. And after that we have a tonicization of the 4 with 5, 5, 7 of 4 and 4. And then a cadence. A regular progression. What if I take this chord? A G7 chord, G dominant 7th, and instead of this F, what if I write it as E sharp? The sound will be exactly the same, but the function will change. Instead of 5, 7 of 4 in G major, I will have, because I know this G will be then flat 6 of one key, of which key I can go minor 6 down and find this key, and it will be B minor or B major. Both are possible. So, and the next example demonstrates this progression. This is like a switch point. Instead of continuing in G major, through this respelling and reinterpretation of the chord, we switch to another key. Let's hear it. I'm going to play the first one in G major. And now, at this point, after that, I will change to the lower line. I have a limited keyboard in front of me, so I couldn't play this pitch. I played only this once, but I'm sure you get the impression. So, this is what we call enharmonic modulation. As I said, this is like a switch point. At this point, it can continue in G major, but it can also continue in another key in B major or B minor. It depends on the interpretation of the chord. Let's take a look at a literature example. Let's have a listen. As you probably noticed, the last chord sounds like tonic, and it is our new tonic, and it is a B major chord. So that means the piece or the excerpt, the passage ends in B major. But at the beginning you see many natural signs, and this time this chord sounds like a tonic. Let's listen to it once again and pay attention to this point. You will hear this one as tonic and at the end B major chord as tonic. It begins in G major with 1-6, and after that we have 2-6, and here a cadential 6-4, 5-7, and 1. So until this point everything is as usual, but here happens something. If you look at the chord, we have G, G, continuous, D, continuous, and we have also a B, which sounds in the accompaniment figure, G, B, D, and E sharp. This is the point of the modulation. If you take it as F natural, then it is 5-7 of 4 in G major. At the same time, it is the German augmented 6 chord in B major. After that, we have 1-6-4, a cadential 6-4, and 5-7, exactly the same usage in B major. As you see, enharmonic modulation is actually a special kind of common chord modulation. In common chord modulation, we have one chord which is diatonically member of both keys. But here, the chords don't look the same. In the first key, we have F natural. In the other key, in the next key, we have to respell it enharmonically. The sound is the same, spelling is different, and function of the chord is also different. That means the direction of the chord is different. 5-7 of 4, that means G dominant 7, wants to go to C major, but a German augmented 6 chord wants to go to F sharp dominant 7th or a cadential 6-4, etc., to the dominant chord in its key. This is the analysis by Koska. Everything is the same. Let's listen to it once again. Using the major minor 7th chord was one method in enharmonic modulation, and the other method uses the diminished 7th chord. As I mentioned already, here we have a G diminished 7th, which belongs to A flat major. Actually to A flat minor. In A flat major it is a borrowed chord. And the same chord, but instead of F flat, I write it as E natural. That changes the labeling, the name of the chord, to E diminished 7th, because the root is the leading tone. It belongs to F minor or F major. In F major, it will be a borrowed chord. The first one was, and now B, and example C, the same chord, but this time spelled as C sharp diminished seventh. The sound is exactly the same, but because C sharp is the leading tone, it belongs to D minor and the resolution will be into D minor chord. And the last one is spelled as A sharp diminished seventh. A sharp is the leading tone and it belongs to B minor or B major as borrowed chord, and the resolution will be to B minor chord. The same sonority, but 4 different keys and 4 different resolutions. This is an example taken from a string quartet by Haydn. Let's have a listen. The excerpt begins in A flat major, and this is the tonic chord. In the second half of the measure, we hear 4 in second inversion for only one beat, and after that, we hear a borrowed 7, borrowed from A flat minor. And then the repetition of the progression, 1, once again 4, and borrowed 7, and once again 1. After that, something happens. Instead of F flat, we hear the same sound. This is the same sound. But instead of F flat, if you take this part, the first part, the only difference is the E natural here. Instead of F flat, it is written as E natural. If you take this one, it is a G diminished seventh, which belongs to A flat major. But here, the same sound, the same chord is spelled as E diminished seventh, which make it the 7. It is at the same time the 7, a borrowed 7 in A flat major, but it is also 7 in F minor. And after that, the music continues in F flat minor. As I said, it is a specific kind of common chord modulation. Also, in this modulation type, the chord belongs both to the initial key and to the next key with an enharmonic spelling. Not diatonically, we have to respell it enharmonically. This is the analysis by Koska. The only thing I forgot to mention is this chord. D flat goes to C and the chord becomes dominant 7th chord, not leading tone 7th anymore, dominant 7th, but it doesn't change anything. It is an enharmonic modulation. Let's listen to it once again. There are also some other interesting usages of enharmonicism, and this one is one example of this usage. It is taken from the Impromptu by Schubert, Franz Schubert. Let's listen to it. The key is given. It begins in G major. It also ends in G major. Here we have a cadential 6/4. If you look at the pictures, it is 1/6/4, and after that we have 5/7. This is a cadential 6/4. By the way, the excerpt, the piece is originally in G flat major. It is transposed for demonstration purposes. And at the end, we have the tonic chord. But between them, in these 5 measures or in these 4 measures, something very interesting happens. Let's take a look at it. The second measure of the example is a G7 in third inversion. If you analyze it in G major, it is 5, 4, 2 of 4, and it wants to go to C major, to the 4th degree, or C minor, a borrowed chord, and it goes to the minor 4 in first inversion. So after that, here we have a very interesting thing. In such situations, if you see a complicated chord, the first thing you should do should be to write the name of the chord, and it is an E flat 7. And after that we have an A flat minor. So if you look at this chord, this is actually the same chord as this one, only instead of D flat we have C sharp. Everything else the same. We can also say this is actually this is a German augmented 6 chord, but in lead sheet symbols there's no indication for that. We have to write E flat 7, and then we have G major. In second inversion, a cadential 6/4. So let's take a look at this situation. Sometimes it's better to go backwards. Let's begin with this chord and try to make a Roman numeral analysis of this chord. It won't be difficult. In G major, this chord will be German augmented 6 chord. And let's go another step back and analyze this one, A flat minor. If it had been A flat major, it would have been our Neapolitan chord, and it doesn't change. It is now minor Neapolitan. It is not a very common chord. The Neapolitan chord is almost always major, but sometimes we can see some example of a minor Neapolitan chord. Go one more step back and we will see this is the dominant of the Neapolitan. I clear the picture for 2 of 4, and after that we have minor 4. And the progression is very conventional. After 4 we have Neapolitan, which is actually lower 2. This is flat 2, in this case flat 2 minor chord. Predominant, and after that we have a German augmented 6 chord, which is the strongest predominant chord. After that we have to have a chord with dominant function like cadential 6/4. What is this chord? This is 5, 4, 2 of Neapolitan. The interesting part is this. There's no modulation, by the way. This is not an enharmonic modulation. This is another interesting usage of enharmonicism. The same chord we hear E flat dominant 7th, And here again, E flat, dominant 7th, but with completely different functions. Here it is 5 of Neapolitan, but here it is a German augmented 6 chord in our home key. This is the analysis by Koska. Everything is the same. As you see, 5-7 of Neapolitan is the same as German augmented 6 chord in our home key. Let's listen to it once again. Let's make a couple of exercises. The instruction is clear. Analyze the given chord. Those chords are given. Then show any possible enharmonic reinterpretations of that chord, keeping the same key signature. That means we shouldn't change the key signature. Each enharmonic reinterpretation should involve a new key, not just an enharmonically equivalent key, such as G sharp and A flat. This shouldn't happen. You can pause the video now and try to do the exercise. You can write it down or you can do it in your head, as you wish. So let's analyze this chord first. This is a C sharp diminished 7th. In D major, it is 7, 7. We have three possible enharmonic reinterpretations. Let's begin with this one. If we respell it as A sharp diminished 7th, then we will be in B minor. If we respell it as G diminished 7th, G, B flat, D flat, and F flat, it will be in A flat, major or minor, 7, and finally we can also spell it, that was G diminished 7th, we can also spell it as E diminished 7th, B flat, and here D flat. This would be then in F, major or minor. Let's write minor, the same function. By the way, I didn't care about bass positions. Actually, we should care about them. The first one is 6-5, and the second one is 4-3, and the third one is 4-2, and this is E diminished 7. Let's do the second one. It is a B flat 7 chord, and this is 5-7 in E flat major. The dominant 7th chord, or with a correct terminology, major minor 7th chord, has only one enharmonic reinterpretation, and it is German augmented 6 chord. B flat, D, F, and G sharp. And as we know, this note is flat 6 of a particular key. We can find it by going minor 6 down, and we will find D minor. It is German augmented 6th in D minor. And the next one, this time we have a German augmented 6 chord in B minor. And like major minor 7th, also the German augmented 6 chord has only one possible enharmonic reinterpretation, and it is 5-7 chord. Let's write the chord. Instead of E sharp, we are using F flat. And it is the dominant of C major or C minor. And in the next one, we are in E minor and we have an E dominant 7th chord. It is 5-7 of 4 in E minor. We can reinterpret it as a German augmented 6th chord. This time, instead of D, we should use C double sharp. And this is a German augmented 6th chord in G sharp, major or minor. Because we know that the root is flat 6 of 1 key. We can find it by going minor 6 down. We will find G sharp. This is an analysis exercise. You can pause the video now and try to analyze the passage. Although we see in the instruction, do not try to analyze these examples without hearing them, I believe we can do it, and I always say that you should be able to understand the music only by looking at the notes. You should have this ability. The excerpt is in E major, but at the end, as we see, the key changes. We have many natural signs. So, it begins with 1, and here we have a D sharp, diminished 7th, D sharp, F sharp, A, and C natural. That means it is a borrowed 7. And after that, once again, 1. And here we have a second inversion dominant chord. This is B, dominant 7th in second inversion, which is followed by a first inversion tonic triad, and then root position again. And here something happens. Actually, if we compare this sound with this sound, we will see it is exactly the same. C natural, F sharp, and A. But instead of D sharp, we have E flat. We have an enharmonic respelling, and also we will have an enharmonic reinterpretation. This is not D sharp, diminished 7th anymore. This is now F sharp, diminished 7th. It is spelled as F sharp, A, C, and E flat. So, this is, although the spelling is different, this is still a sound. This is still the 7 in E major, but at the same time, it is also 7 of G major. And this time it will be in the third inversion. And as usual, it is followed by the real dominant chord, 5-7, which is also followed by the new tonic. And once again, 5-7 and 1. Let's hear it. This is another example. Once again, you can pause the video and try to analyze the passage. But we see at the beginning we are in C minor, and it also begins with C minor chord, C minor triad. And after that we have the dominant chord, G7, in third inversion, which is followed by the first inversion, tonic triad. And here we have a D half diminished seventh in first inversion, and here something happens. It is an F sharp diminished seventh. If you analyze it in C minor, it will be then 7 of 5, 7 of G major. But after that you see with the change of pitches it becomes B7. Like every dominant seventh chord, it belongs to the key whose root is a perfect fifth lower than the root of the dominant seventh chord, and in this case it is E minor, the resolution. I skip this part for now. I continue in E minor. This is the first inversion tonic triad, and after that we have 2 half diminished 6 5 and 5, it becomes 5 7 and then 1. The last 3 measures are in E minor. So we have another enharmonic reinterpretation here. Instead of F sharp diminished seventh, the piece interprets the chord as D sharp diminished seventh. D sharp is here. Instead of E flat, we can write it with D sharp, and then we would have 7 in E minor, but not in root position. It is in first inversion, followed by 5 4 3, followed by the real dominant chord, which resolves into the tonic chord. Let's hear the progression. And this is another exercise of enharmonic modulation. You can pause the video now and try to analyze it. The excerpt begins in D major. It begins with the tonic chord, and the excerpt ends in F sharp minor. The end is F sharp minor. You see here C sharp 7, and like every dominant seventh chord, it belongs to the key whose root is a perfect fifth lower than the root of the dominant seventh chord. So let's go step by step. 1, and here F sharp minor chord, which is our 3, and then 4. After 4 we have the first inversion tonic triad and a dominant chord, a passing. This is a passing chord and tonic chord again. And here something happens. We have D7, and D7 is 5 7 of 4 in D major. If we reinterpret this chord as a German augmented sixth chord instead of C natural, if we take B sharp, then it will be German augmented sixth of F sharp minor. And after that, as usual, we have a cadential 6 4, then 5 7, and the tonic chord. I'm going to play the progression, but I have to make some octave transpositions at the beginning because I have only a 2-octave keyboard in front of me. Let's hear it. I'd like to conclude this lecture with a beautiful excerpt from the literature. It is taken from a song by Schumann. Let's listen to it. The passage is not easy to analyze, but if you understood the principle of enharmonic reinterpretation, then you will be able to explain the harmonies in this passage. The passage begins in B flat major, and at the beginning we have our tonic chord. In the second half of the measure, we have G flat, and then B flat, C sharp, and E natural. The chord contains an enharmonic respelling, and it is C sharp. If you regard C sharp as D flat, then it will be clear that this is our German augmented 6 chord. G flat is flat 6 in B flat major. And as usual, after that we have a cadential 6/4 and 5/7 and the tonic chord again. And if you look at the following chord, the reason of this enharmonic spelling will also be clear, as I explained it in one of the previous slides. Having D natural after D flat looks a little weird in the praxis, although it is the theoretically correct one. In the praxis, it looks a little weird. So, those are separate parts actually. C sharp goes to D natural. B flat stays in the same part, and G flat goes to F. And E natural goes also to the F. So that's the reason of the enharmonic respelling. After that, something interesting happens. Actually, we have exactly the same sound here, but this time not as a German augmented 6 chord, but as sound. It is our German augmented 6 chord, but at the same time, it is also the dominant 7th chord. It is F sharp 7 in B major or in B minor. But after that we have the B major chord. So we are going to talk if it is a modulation or something else, because we will have some difficulties here. First of all, we see C sharp and A, and here C sharp goes to D sharp, but we still have an A, which makes the chord a dominant 7th chord. Instead of tonic chord, we have either 5/7 of 4 in B major or 1/7, or we are going to talk about it. And then here a C7, and then F7 and B flat major. That means 5/7 of 5 in B flat major again, by the way, and 5/7, and finally our tonic chord. So As you see, this modulation doesn't make sense. In this case, we have to interpret the situation differently. I will erase it. And we'll try to find another explanation for this measure. Analysis has to show the relation between chords. If you say something like that, as I wrote in the previous slide, in B major, change to the B major, then having some B7 chord, and after that, suddenly once again changing to B flat, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't give us any connection. If I take this chord, this is B major or B dominant 7, something with B, and try to make a connection between B flat major and this chord, I think the most reasonable solution will be to label it as the Neapolitan chord, but Neapolitan 7. This is also not a common chord. The most common variant of Neapolitan chord is the Neapolitan 6. But we saw in the previous slides, we have sometimes also minor Neapolitan, and here Neapolitan 7. In this case, we assume that this C sharp is an appoggiature to A, appoggiature to D sharp, excuse me, and this A is a chord member, not functionally but as color. Instead of having only the Neapolitan chord, Schumann added also the seventh, the minor seventh, just as color. Maybe in order to move every voice in the chord parallel to the next chord from B dominant 7 to C dominant 7, and maybe for another reason. And if we say this is the Neapolitan chord, then everything makes sense. After Neapolitan, which is a predominant chord, we have a stronger predominant chord, which is 5 of 5, and as usual, after that we have 5, our dominant chord. Then this German augmented 6 chord doesn't make sense anymore, because functionally it should come after the Neapolitan, also after the 5 of 5, because it is the strongest predominant chord. Then instead of this, we should also reinterpret this chord, and it is 5/7 of the Neapolitan. In my opinion, this is the most reasonable explanation of the harmonies. And now I'd like to show you a bad example, an example whose approach you shouldn't follow. So let's take a look at this example. I took it from a book, from a theory book, and you see it begins in B flat. The first half is the same as our example. After that, there's a sudden change into B major with 5/7. Okay, then after that, after 5/7, we have 5/7 of 4. This is also okay, but we don't have 4 or something which is in relation to 4. There's also another sudden change to B flat major, and after that, this is our analysis. This analysis here doesn't make any sense. It doesn't explain the harmonic situation. If I have 5/7 of 4, then I have to have 4 or something that is in relation to 4. It could be another chord built on the same root, for example. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense, and the purpose of the analysis is to explain the situation, to find the relations. If there's no relation, then the analysis doesn't make sense. So, this is a bad example. This shouldn't be your approach. In my opinion, this is the most reasonable explanation of this passage, but there could be better explanations. Always look for better explanations. It is not about correct and wrong. It is about explaining the events, the harmonies. Let's listen to the passage once again.
Es flüstern und sprechen die Blumen, ich aber wandle stumm.
That's all for this lecture. Thank you for watching and I'll see you in the next lecture.